Chapter 14. Marshall. Marshall was tapping his foot at the front of the ballroom. Not because he was impatient, more so because he was happy as he had probably ever been. Even happier than when he was in an operating room. He needed to drive out some of his excess energy. He was waiting to get married for the second time today. Jasmine's cousin Priya had grabbed him after the luncheon, telling him his outfit was in his room. Marshall had been pleasantly surprised to find a pair of very comfortable cotton pants and tunic. They were dark blue with some interesting patterns of blue and silver embroidery on them. Blue was definitely his color, Marshall decided. It brought out his eyes. He understood from Priya that Jasmine was to wear a lighter shade of blue with dark embroidery, which was to match his hue of blue. It was coordinated. All he had to do was follow Jasmine's lead on everything. They had discussed particulars over one of their many video chats. They had also fleshed out what his position in her life would be. The good news was Marshall would have more to do than just look pretty and be her confidant. While he and Jasmine would never see the inside of an operating room again as doctors, they had the opportunity to do a number of great things. There were charity organizations which would love to have them, especially him, work with them to help people. Helping people is what Marshall enjoyed doing the most. His pro bono work and his advocating for charity assistance through Ramsley Hospital and Medical Corporation had been one of the reasons he had kept his seat on the board, at the expense of his practicing medicine. Marshall was actually trading up in careers, he thought with joy. Plus, he was marrying his best friend. Today couldn't get any better in his opinion. Then he saw the back doors open. Widening his already big smile, Marshall expected Priya to enter, followed by Jasmine. His smile dimmed as he watched in surprise as a couple he didn't know entered the ballroom. They looked around for available seats as hotel staff came forward to ensure they were in the right room. Following them came Gabe and Britney. They were holding hands. Britney had a white dress on, lacy and a little over knee length. She was also holding a bouquet of light blue flowers. Marshall grinned at his brother, and the hotel staff quickly found seats for the extra guests. It looked like Britney and Gabe were back together, reflected Marshall. He didn't know what had convinced her to try again, but Marshall was glad for his brother. Perhaps Gabe wouldn't lose out on his inheritance either if they got married this afternoon. Today was just getting better and better. Priya came first, spreading even more flowers out of her basket on the already petal-strewn path down the aisle. While Jasmine's father remained at home, her mother, an aunt, and some cousins had flown in to witness the two ceremonies. Now they were also in traditional dress, seated with the guests. Then Jasmine came through the door, and Marshall's world fell away to just her. She was perfect, with bare feet like him, white cotton pants, a pale blue tunic with darker embroidery, a gauzy overlay sort of long sweater thing, and a lacy veil clipped to her hair. Marshall smiled, then remembered from their chats this was supposed to be a somber affair. He quickly wiped the grin from his mouth, standing up straight and trying to tamp down his outward display of joy. This was being recorded and streamed for posterity for Jasmine's people, soon to be his adopted country and people as well. Marshall wanted to make them proud. Coming to stand beside him, Jasmine and he faced the officiant. There was some talking in his native language and lighting of an incense candle. Marshall did his best to hold in a sneeze as he solemnly listened to the words which he didn't understand. Jasmine had given him the basics of what the ceremony said, and it really was beautiful, even if the translation couldn't capture it all. Marshall enjoyed the cadence of the language, and once again vowed he was going to learn it. Soon enough they had gone through all the motions, and were presented to the guests, who clapped politely. Since Marshall and Jasmine had already done the receiving line previously, they didn't feel the need to do it a second time. Marshall offered his arm to Jasmine, and they walked down the aisle. With a wink at Jasmine, Marshall stopped at the last row of guests. He held a hand out to Britney. Britney, I would like to introduce my wife, Jasmine. Jasmine, this is Britney." "How do you do?" asked Jasmine, a smile playing on her lips. Marshall had kept her up to date on Gabe's troubles with Britney. "Pleased to meet you," responded Britney. Gabe raised an eyebrow, knowing that his brother had an ulterior motive. "Can we help you, Marshall?" "I was wondering how things are going between the two of you." Marshall was perhaps too casual with his tone, knowing that everyone was paying attention to the interchange between the two couples. "Everyone is here. It's a lovely day. Perhaps you would like to take advantage of the venue."
"Marshall has no manners," inserted Jasmine. She patted her husband on the arm. "You should not be putting them on the spot like this. It's not kind."
"I just want them to be happy like I am," protested Marshall. "Why should Gabe and Britt miss this opportunity?" "We're not missing it," wryly noted Gabe. "We were going to wait for you to be finished, then discuss with the appropriate persons if and when we could get married this weekend. Perhaps tomorrow." "The officiant is right there," pointed out Marshall. "It could happen right now."
Jasmine dissolved into giggles. "I do apologize for him."
"He is pushy," replied Gabe to Jasmine. "I hope you can handle him."
"Oh, I think I'll do just fine." She smiled up at Marshall.
"She is totally in charge," agreed Marshall, giving her a smile before returning his attention to Gabe and Britney. "So?"
"If you would just give us a moment, perhaps we could arrange something," responded Britney, trying to hold back a smile.
"I think my mom already is," inserted Gabe as he saw Dottie talking to the officiant who had done the triple wedding earlier in the day. He took Britney's hand in his. "Are you ready to get married?"
"Yes." Britney gave him a smile. "Are you? Any second thoughts?"
"No second thoughts."
Gabe gave her hand a squeeze.
Marshall beamed. "Then I suggest we switch places." "Give me a moment to see if it's even possible."
Gabe let go of Britney's hand, rising. He moved forward along the aisle to join Dottie and the pastor. "This is really happening," breathed Britney. Tara put an arm around her. "If he messes up, Reg and I will deal with him for you."
"He isn't going to mess up," interjected Marshall. "He spent the last week on my couch pining for Britney. Gabe is in deep and has finally realized it. He still has no people skills, so you'll have to be a little lenient with him. But I know Gabe is in it for the long term. He loves Britney."
"I love him," Britney said simply. "I'm ready to start the rest of our lives together." Gabe talked to Dylan's oldest son, Caden, for a moment, giving him a room key before the boy jogged out of the ballroom on an errand.
"Can I escort you up the aisle?"
asked Marshall to distract Britney. He wondered what Gabe had forgotten that he needed to send Caden out to get. "Marshall," giggled Jasmine. "Perhaps Britney has someone else in mind."
"I will have that honor, thank you,"
stated Reg firmly. Gabe continued to discuss with the pastor until Caden came swiftly into the ballroom. Caden gave Gabe the keycard back, along with the jeweler's box.
"If everyone would please remain seated, we will witness the nuptials of Gabriel Ramsley to Britney Crawford,"
the officiant announced at the front of the room as he took the box from Gabe. "Congratulations. You're a beautiful bride," said Jasmine as Britney, Tara, and Reg vacated their seats. "Thank you. You look lovely as well," replied Britney as Tara fussed over her. Marshall and Jasmine sat in the vacant seats as the music started from the small orchestra. Soon enough, bridesmaid Tara was headed up the aisle.
"I honestly don't believe this day can get better,"
remarked Marshall in quiet satisfaction to Jasmine as they watched Reg escort Britney to Gabe. "It has been pretty remarkable," agreed Jasmine. Marshall wrapped an arm around her shoulders, and Jasmine comfortably leaned on him as they watched his brother be wed to Britney, who was absolutely glowing. Marshall reflected the weekend was almost perfect. They were surrounded by friends and family. All the weddings had gone off without a hitch. Gabe might even be able to keep his job and inheritance. Marshall couldn't recall if their father's ultimatum expired exactly at a specific hour, or at the end of the day. If it was the end of the day, Gabe and Parker could both continue at Ramsley Medical. Even if it wasn't,
Parker would continue the family legacy. Perhaps he would hire Gabe back. Marshall was sure that it wouldn't be against James's rules. Marshall idly wondered what they might be like as fathers. He had every confidence that he and Jasmine would be okay as parents. Gabe would likely be a nervous wreck at first until he got the hang of it. Too bad Marshall wouldn't be nearby to tease him about it. Parker would likely hire a nanny. It was a little sad in Marshall's opinion. Hopefully his brother would prove him wrong. The only thing Marshall wasn't so happy with was the fact his future kids wouldn't grow up with their cousins like he had. Marshall had loved getting together with his cousins for birthdays, holidays, and general mayhem. It had been great since they were all boys except for Addison. Poor Addison had hung around with their moms, while the boys roamed in a pack having adventures. Marshall hoped his kids would have adventures, even if they were destined to be royalty. In his humble opinion, all kids should have the opportunity to explore and have fun. Marshall had a look around the room. Here the Ramsleys all were, probably not to gather all together until next year again as a family. Aunts, brothers, cousins, and now their children. It made him feel nostalgic for a moment. "Are you okay?" questioned Jasmine softly. "Great," managed Marshall, quickly blinking. He came to his feet, a hand out to help Jasmine stand, as everyone stood politely for Britney and Gabe, the latest bride and groom, as they came down the aisle. Jasmine and he followed the general flow of people as they came forward to congratulate Britney and Gabe. "You should be standing right beside us," mentioned Gabe wryly as he shook his brother's hand. "Gabe doesn't like to be the center of attention," observed Britney, her free arm hooked through her husband's as she shook Jasmine's proffered hand. "We already did this in the morning," blissfully smiled Marshall. "It would seem a little redundant." "Thanks," muttered Gabe. Marshall just grinned. He and Jasmine made the rounds, socializing with everyone. It really was the first time Marshall could introduce her to all his family, since they had been so busy with the weddings. As he had predicted, Jasmine and Dottie got on very well, chatting amicably and learning more about one another. He spotted some of the other guys gathered around and wandered over. "You what?" questioned Drew, frowning at the group of guys. "We found a positive pregnancy test," explained Noah. "We're trying to find out who might be a dad," mentioned Max. "We may have taken a few bets as to who we think it might be. If you want in on the action, we can write you down." "You do realize that you're speaking to my brother, the cop, about gambling, right?" drawled an amused Molson. "It's more about the mystery than the money," defended Max. "We just want to see if we can figure out who it is before there is an announcement." "Beth isn't pregnant," dryly noted Drew. "You can take her off the list." "We heard through the grapevine you two were waiting, so no one's bet on Bethany anyways," shrugged Max. Drew turned to Molson. "How is it that they know more about my business than I know about my business?" "The wonders of being part of our family," grinned Marshall. "Plus the girls talk, then they tell us." "Then you already know there ain't no point in having Holly on the list," observed Molson. "She and I are still in the new dating mode." "Really?" mused Drew. "We're not rushing things," noted Molson. "When are you getting married again?" "Married?" asked Marshall with curiosity. It was the first time he had heard about it. "In May," sighed Drew. "Are you getting cold feet?" questioned Noah at Drew's noted lack of enthusiasm. "No. Bethany's mother has become involved in the wedding planning," grimly stated Drew. "She thinks we're doing things far too bougie simple, whatever that means." "It means cheap," clarified Molson. "It means what we can afford," noted Drew. "Plus, it's what Beth wants." "You could take advantage of the weekend. Grab the pastor before he leaves," offered Marshall. "Family's all here. You just need to get Bethany's family." "No thanks. Everything is set for May." Drew turned down their offer. "Suit yourself," shrugged Max. "Or you could get on the betting and we might win some cash to help with that wedding." "How much is the buy-in?" questioned Molson with amusement. $1,000, shrugged Noah.
$1,000, asked Drew in disbelief. That's about half my rent. You pay $2,000 for that apartment? Wondered Max. Really? How much is your salary? Queried Marshall. Not enough, said Drew. Look, it's too steep for me. You guys enjoy the mystery. You're a detective, mentioned Max. You could help us out by helping us figure out who is pregnant. No. Drew shook his head. Not happening. What about you? Marshall asked Molson. Are you in? No, I'll leave it to you guys to figure out, declared Molson. I prefer to use the cash to eat, have power, heat, useful stuff. Speaking of eating, Max peered over the crowd. I think the private dining room has opened up. Finally, I'm starved, replied Noah. I'm going to find Elle and enjoy whatever they have planned for food tonight. Noah and Max wandered away as Bethany came to Drew's side. Where is Holly? Wondered Molson as he looked around the room. She and Kitty went to the ladies' room a moment. They'll meet us at the dining area, said Bethany as she came to the group. Drew automatically put an arm around her, pulling her to his side. It was a lovely wedding, Marshall. Thank you. I'm glad you could come, stated Marshall before happily excusing himself to go and find his bride. If you enjoyed this chapter of The Wedding, Book 10 of the Ramsley Brothers series, please look for more. You can also subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss any further chapters as they drop. Thank you and happy listening.